So why don't we have the numbers? Okay, I think there's many reasons. Maybe not everybody thinks the same way. Not everybody has the same sort of independent streak or skepticism or intelligence. But another reason that I think maybe isn't recognized as much as I'd like it to be is that we don't let, that independent streak that I think is something that many of us have in common, or that might even be a common factor in most libertarians, is that independent thinking. That may have a side effect that is causing a decrease in our number, or not decrease, but just that explosion of numbers that we would rather have. And I think it has to do with relationships and how much, because it's like independent, yeah, I can do everything on my own kind of thing, which I get it. It doesn't necessarily have to mean that. There can be interdependence, etc. We all have some kind of family or friends, so we do value relationships. But what I'm getting at is we may not value relationships and relationship skills as much as your typical left-winger or neocon or whatever. The others, the commies, the socialists, the people who want to be dominated. Okay, I have a suspicion. That we need more relationship skills, more of a reason to value relationships, to recognize that we can be stronger and our numbers can be greater if we focus just a little bit more on our emotional intelligence. And I'm using that term emotional intelligence because it's a very umbrella term. Okay? Like awareness and communication and how to negotiate and how to convince people that, and yeah, here's another factor. You want to be good at debating, you want to be good at talking to a commie, and actually them walking away, instead of pissed off, they walk away thinking, wow, that's something I might consider. And see if anybody has any questions or comments, ideas.
Have you heard of the book, How to Talk to Anyone?
No, I know.
There's a book that talks about that, that's specific on how to talk to people and how to form relationships and stuff like that. And just how to basically get your message across.
Thank you. I want to comment on that real quick. Like, I'm with you 100%. Like, yeah, they do and we don't. The term manipulate kind of throws me off a little, and I mostly agree that that's what they do to some degree. I'm going to propose something that's what I consider has way more integrity than that, and yet just as much effect. But
just that years ago, some libertarians looked at the Myers-Briggs test, where you speak to people with different temperament types in different ways. For example, if they're like more rule-bound kind of person, like half the population, you speak to them in one way. If they're a real greedy idealist, you speak to them in another way. That sort of thing.
Yeah. So meeting somebody where they're at, speaking more their language.
Yeah.
Okay, and I do want to comment on that in terms of the sort of flip side. To me, that's drifting into a manipulative kind of area. Well, thanks for you heard that. That's great. The way I intended. Where instead, what about when I said integrity a moment ago? What I'm proposing, this tool set, is more about modifying, integrating certain ways of being, listening, and empathy. A certain kind of empathy I call practical empathy. Not the it's opposite of cognitive in a way, or not opposite, it's different. I'll go to that later maybe. I don't want to get too deep in the weeds.
Scott, you call it manipulation of Jacob Hornberg, who goes to Mexico and gives a speech in Spanish. I know he's fluent in Spanish. But that's meeting people where they are.
Sure, it totally is.
If he goes down there,
that's not motivation. I agree.
Yeah, if he goes down there and speaks English, they're going to just say, "Who's this gringo talking?"
So was it manipulative when Cory Booker did it on the debate stage?
There's a fine line between manipulation and getting your message
There
across
is.
clearly.
There is. Yeah, I mean, I'm manipulating you right now because I wore the other end.
Yeah.
And manipulation can be used for good, it can be used for bad.
Sure.
You just I mean,
Anybody else?
I hate to do that. So.
Hinted at it. It is a form of empathy that I call practical empathy because it's affective. There's two forms of empathy if you study psychology. So cognitive and affective. Okay, affective is emotional. Cognitive is what I teach and practice for about 17 years now. I've been practicing 16 years teaching it. And to me, it's kind of opposite of PC languaging, or at least the practice of this is the opposite of that. Because we're not responsible for other people's feelings. There's one of the principles that underlies this system I'm talking about. So I'm sure you can see, being libertarians, like, and I'm assuming most of you are at least, that this coincides. To me, I call this the language of liberation. I mean, that very principle right there is, to me, it's enough. It's like, I'm responsible for my feelings. So you can't touch me with your insults. In fact, in this languaging, there is no such thing as insults. Like, somebody insult me right now.
You're stupid.
Yeah, so do you really value intelligence? And so you'd rather be around people that stimulate you mentally?
Okay, come back.
And things I can also be sarcastic with it, as you guys can imagine. You'd be like, oh, are you really wanting more of your kind of thinking and talking? You know, I mean, there's tone of voice, or ways to do it, but of course, I'm not here to teach you how to be sarcastic with it.
We got that down.
Yeah. So the point is, it's like, people's opinions are their opinions, and we don't have to let them affect us, versus what we see happening in the world right now, right? I mean, you guys, does somebody want to speak just a moment on what you see happening in the world that sort of coincides with PC language?
People are increasingly just triggered by everything.
Triggered?
I'm triggered by that.
Dave Chappelle?
Oh, there you
Yeah.
There are a lot of people that are afraid to talk and be authentic now, and then the lack of authenticity kind of leads this vicious cycle where it becomes normal to be inauthentic, and being authentic becomes very awkward.
Yeah.
Not good.
Yeah. And it crushes independent thoughts, even innovation, if you take it a little further. So I'm going to actually skip whatever comes next for a second. And, I mean, really, this is part of the solution. I just want to give an example, okay? Let's say you're talking to somebody, some commie, and they're like, hey, I really want this one government program to control people because it saves people from whatever, or helps them in some way, okay? So our temptation might be to fact them, fact them out of our lives, or advise them, or about how stupid they are, or something like that. Versus, how about just listening and empathizing? Okay, and this form of empathizing, really all forms of empathizing, in my opinion, do not mean agreeing or disagreeing. Okay, so I'll give you an example. It's like the commie person said this thing, wanting their, to be controlled and so forth, and for us to be controlled. And we're like, hey, so it sounds like we really have the same values for life and security. And so what we're doing is we're diving into what's under the emotions, to under the opinions, to the underlying values that inform them, okay? And we're saying, oh, because we all share the same values, just at different levels. Like our values here may be slightly lower on the security area, where independence is a little higher, and they're maybe opposite a little bit there, but we all value life and love and connection, all these, integrities and honesty. So you can be like, identify those values where we get along, and see the honesty here. So we're not manipulating, we're not lying, we're we're being truthful. If we don't necessarily value what they do, we should not tell them that. But odds are, you care about life. You care about your family. You care about all the things they care about. You just have different strategies to get there. So it's like, hey, wow, I care about those things too. And it sounds like we just have different ways of wanting to get to that point of safety, prosperity, health, whatever. Okay? So when you're bringing yourself with, you're seeing with them, you're putting yourself beside them to go on the same journey versus meeting them head on like we're tempted to do, right? I mean, it feels good to like school them in the truth until they walk away or until they yell back at you or whatever. I mean, you're being ineffective. And you like that feeling of, you know, I mean, sure, at first it might feel good. But yeah, I won't go into depth there. Nobody likes to carry around this sort of enmity, this sort of like, oh, you know, like being a hater basically is what I call it. So yeah, what do you guys have thoughts on what I just said?
Yeah, you're right. There's a lot of common ground if you go to basics like education, health, family, and things like that. But what I found is there are some very big differences in a lot of people on the different sides, in fact, where some people care a lot about tribe. They want to fit in, so they virtue signal, and they really do care more about that. Fitting in with their tribe, being viewed a certain way, and they care about actual people. They even care about people in their life. For example, I've got people who are closely friends and family, but they would sell me up over an argument to gain points with the tribe.
Yeah. You don't agree with their strategies. The thing is, I would propose that you, because I see what you're getting at, I think. Correct me if I'm wrong. You're saying, well, but maybe we don't have the same values, right?
Yeah, it's different values. They value that more than they value the same.
So I'll be more clear this time. We all share the same values. You care about tribe and community, I'll call it community, okay? Just not as much as them. This is not black and white, okay? Does that make sense?
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. The balance of their values is very different. It's not like there's no
It's
overlap.
different. And here's the thing. We're not telling them that, we don't have to tell them. Okay, so if you're so different in your values that you feel like it'd be lying to say, well, we share the same values. You don't have to even say that. Be truthful. Hey, wow, it sounds like you really value community and belonging and acceptance. And I hear that, and I want to support you in that, or whatever way you want to put it. That sounds kind of new agey, but that's their language in a way, right? And then after that, into like, hey, I think we just have different ways of wanting to get to that, you know, because I want people to have that. I want you to have that. Yeah, I see a raised hand. Is that what being there?
Oh no, I was just thinking about how it seems like what you're saying used to be true. What you're saying used to be a lot more true up until about the last year and a half, where everything's gotten more divisive, both over pandemic best approaches and over woke stuff. That it used to be that it really was true, that we wanted the same things and had different ideas of how to get there.
Yeah.
But now there's such extreme ideas of what's right and wrong that there's even less common ground.
Oh yeah. Yeah, way less. And I'm glad you didn't say there is no common ground.
It's hard to get through to people that have been heavily propagandized.
Oh, it is. And you know, this isn't just about, you know, we've kind of zoomed in on debating, and because I really kind of gave up on trying to convince anybody to change their perspective on things. I was using that as an example, and I'm not capitulating. I'm not saying, oh, okay, you guys convinced me, never use this, whatever. I mean, I'm just saying, if you're into that, and you like trying to convince people, you want to step up to the challenge, this is a great tool for that. And I do think we still have, as humans, all the same values. It's just they are drastically, and I see that. I see what's happened. It seems to be accelerating. I'm super concerned, almost kind of scared, like, fuck, this this is it's gone off the rails. It's clown world. My friends and I call it clown world. We're just like blown away. It seems like people are insane.
You know, if I could push back a little bit on
There's the same.
impassable barrier between us. Like, honestly, whoever, like, you go up to whoever's most hardcore about lockdowns, the established means of fighting COVID, whatever, or the most woke person. And if you buddy up to them, you get to the sense where they think of you as being in their tribe. You can question some of the approaches. You can question some of the policies, and they'll open up, and in a lot of cases they'll agree with you. Like, yeah, I mean, man, this stuff really does suck. We just really need to do this so we can get COVID done and behind us, right? Like, it's not that they're reacting to what they're reacting to is a different tribe. They identify you very quickly as a different tribe, and part of that is because of the temperature right now. It is very important whether or not you're part of my tribe or the other tribe, because we're at war, and everybody recognizes that, and so they're very hyper vigilant to make sure that they placed you correctly. But the fact of the matter is, people are open about ideas, about policies, about ways to achieve the ends that they want. And if you can get to that point of discussing those things without drawing up the barriers of defense, then there's a lot less resistance.
Thanks. Yeah. Okay. So I want to go ahead and move away from debate, as this is being a tool for better debate. Okay. And I'll probably need to quickly cover some of these other things, maybe not get to them all. Increased ability to connect. I think that's probably obvious. Like, if you're better with empathy, you're a better listener, you're more patient, you exhibit all of the, the traits that are part of that make it easier to connect with people. Okay. I'll assume, we'll do another Q&A, and you guys can address that if you have questions about it. Transform anger into peace. Okay. I'll give you one example as a way of showing you how this can work for that. It's something I use in my groups. And I do a free group every other week. We meet up at Central Market, North Lamar. So the anger example, it's kind of an exercise I get people to do. It's like, you're cruising along, and somebody zooms right up on your ass, and they're like tailgating you, right? And you're like, fuck, get off my ass, man. And here's the thing, it's like, feel the anger. That's fine. Just feel it. And then next, okay, say it to yourself, like, oh, I'm pissed off because my need for, and here's the value thing, my need for security, or my need for respect, or consideration, or whatever your thing. Doesn't matter. Identify the value. Like, I really needed more of that. Okay, now this example is going to fit all things having to do with this tool set. Okay, so I'll explain the pieces. Here's another principle as part of this thing. It's responsibility. Okay, when you practice this, you are practicing being more responsible in your own head, your words, and asking it of the people around you. Okay, and I'll show you why and how. Okay, I'm pissed off. That person was on my ass. I'm pissed off because I really needed, in that case, more security, or my need for security wasn't met, or my value, I'm pissed because of my value for security. There's just different ways of thinking or saying the same thing. Do you see how that is taking more responsibility for the thing that happened?
Is this the nonviolent communication?
Yeah.
Okay, I've
It's
read that
based on-
before, and yes, that's exactly, yeah, it's excellent.
Does anybody else want to comment on how that links up to responsibility?
Yeah, you're not blaming them for your emotions.
Yeah. So
Your emotions,
yeah.
they did something, and you.
And you see how powerful that can be, or empowering. Because you're taking, so you're like, you can fix or change if it's part of you. Even if it's just changing your attitude about it. Which we'll do right now. Okay, watch. So after we do that whole empathy formula to ourselves, then we, at some point, maybe we'll have to do that 20 times before we can lighten up enough to do part 2, which is the more powerful, maybe. Like, okay, what's up with that person? And here's where we gotta use our imaginations. So we get to practice having more imagination about what's going on for other people, okay? So we can't talk to them or ask them questions, so instead we're like, oh, they're probably on their way to the hospital with a pregnant wife in the trunk, or they're late to their job, and somebody got it. They're late to their job, and if they're late one more time, you're going to be fired. So what's their need that they're meeting right now by speeding? Or speeding, I mean, not speeding, but like, driving recklessly according to you. Well, security, job security. So you both have a need for security, just different ways, right? And so when you do that, what happens? When you do that in your head, like, oh, that person is just doing their human thing, okay? Does anybody want to throw out some, like, why they think, or what's that doing? What's that doing to you when you go there about a person who is attacking you? Okay, then nobody's got burning desire to shit.
Hold on, I can think of like
You're taking them out of that category. Sorry, out of that category. Ben.
I grew up in California, and like my dad would do that, and I'm like, oh, this is normal.
Oh yeah, bumper to bumper. That's what I learned.
I was like, that sounds like a day that ends in Y in California. So I'm like, oh, this person is just driving how people normally do, or maybe they're from California and they were taught that.
Yeah, we have one in our family. So you go through that event and you get mad about it, and then an hour later you're still mad about it. Right? There's nothing you can do about it. You're letting yourself be mad. So we have a phrase in our family. It's called, "How long are you going to sit in that poopy diaper?" How long are you going to suffer with that feeling that you can't change it? You can't go back and make that person not tailgate. So how long are you going to sit there and suffer with yourself?
Okay, I'll cut to the chase on that. It's like the things that it does to you. Number one, okay, your brain starts to recognize, if you do this repetitively, like any exercise, the brain starts to recognize, oh, everybody's not out to get me. Imagine that. Like everybody's just fulfilling their own needs, and you become more chill. And eventually, like your brain just starts realizing sooner and sooner and sooner after the event being something somebody did that pissed you off. And pretty soon what happened, or eventually with practice, what happens is you don't even get pissed off because you're so used to eventually getting to that point of chill, right? So there's an example of how this sort of tool set, that I want to be super clear, I didn't write that book that you brought up. I read it many times, and then I wrote my own book on that.
It's an excellent book.
Yeah. And I tweaked some things, like, because that book, yeah, you talked about
It's a great book.
What's the book?
It's called Practical EmPath. It's free. Like, I'll share that afterwards. People want to know.
Practical
In fact, if you go to there's a resources part that got cut off there. Maybe we can scroll that down now since I'm getting down the list. But anyway, so what are we at now? Family. Okay. Yeah. So another quick little. Well, this is kind of a story. In Mexico, I was hanging out in Mexico for a year, and I was working with this family amongst others. But here's the story: it's about one family where at one point the mom is juggling like a baby and cooking at the same time, and her little son runs in the room. He's like, "Mom, I'm bored," and she starts to do the thing she normally does, like, "Oh, okay, I'm gonna solve this problem for you," kind of thing, right? Like, "Oh, did you try that?" I'm like, "Hey, Lisa," and she's like, "Oh, yeah, go for it." And so I'm like, "Hey, Axiom," the kid's name, and I'm like, "Sounds like you're really bored." So I'm recognizing the feeling he's having, and of course he's like, "Duh, I just said that." But then I'm going past that. I'm like, "Okay, were you looking for mental stimulation or like camaraderie, companionship, physical stimulation? Like what kind of things do you think would?" And that's all I had to say. And he just like starts thinking, "Oh yeah," runs off, gets an idea of how he can entertain himself. Okay, And there's a few lessons in that brief interaction, right? For one thing, like the problem, in my opinion, parents control their kids too much. They protect them too much. They guide them too much. Like, let the kid do their thing and learn lessons. Of course, I'm not talking about letting them run out in the street or something, right? Chris?
We all play in the street. We all play in the street in my day.
Yeah, in our day, right? We did a lot of
Depends on the
things.
street.
It does just depend on the street. You don't let them go fucking play in the middle of 35.
Right, yeah.
Neighborhood
Does
street.
anybody have this saying that their parents said to them? It's like, go play in the freeway. Like, it's a joke. But my parents were jokesters.
Go catch that tire.
That's what I used to say to my friends.
But anyway, so there's the parenting thing. There's a lot more to it. In my opinion, this is a tool set. It's sort of like learning to shoot, right? It has at least two benefits. You can hunt, and you can defend your home, right? So this tool set, in my opinion, it's one of the values of it is it's going to benefit your entire life. Okay? If you're basically what I'm going to call a pussy, if you're somebody who is like caving all the time, who's like so eager to please other people at your own detriment, then this is going to help you. Like, especially if you're having that problem with your mate, okay? I'm not talking about being domineering or violent or anything like that. I'm talking about stop letting people step on you. And it's maybe not what this group needs as much, I have a feeling. But, you know, it happens. It happens to all of us sometimes, right? So, what else? Manipulation. I've become a lie detector. Like, that's only a piece of manipulation, but it's definitely a big piece. If you spend years and years asking somebody says something, you're like, oh wow, did you really want more respect in that situation? They're like, nah, it was more like consideration or something. You're zooming in, instead of just accepting whatever they say and saying, oh yeah, that sucks, let's go get a beer. Or here, let me, give you a reward or a gift or a punishment or whatever in order to fix that. We lose eventually that temptation to fix people. Instead, we're asking them questions. Back on track here. It's like, what was that like for you? And it may be fake it till you make it at first, but it integrates if you practice it enough, and you become it, and you are genuinely curious, and you're diving deeper with every interaction. You're pushing people, you're pulling, you're asking for more, you're going deeper. And if you do that for years, when somebody's words do not coincide with their body language, oh my God. And you don't have to study NLP or any of these techniques like study, watch for that. It's all subconscious. It just happens. You're just like, fuck, they're lying to me. And then you go through stages, or at least I did, okay? At first it was a stage of anger, right? Like this, what? You gotta go wash your cat. What? And it's like, God damn it, but then you start realizing, and it's just another stage, or at least it was for me. Oh, this person really cares about my feelings, and they're afraid to tell me the truth because they don't want to harm the relationship or hurt my feelings or create any kind of like disharmony, blah, blah, blah. And then you're just like, oh wow, I get it. And you can call them out on it or not. But you see it, okay? And that's just one piece of the resistance to manipulation that can happen with this stuff. And no, it's not a religion of mine. I'm just into it. Heightened awareness of other perspectives, well, that's kind of a duh. But I'll quickly, it's like, if you practice constantly putting yourself aside and your judgments and your analysis, has anybody here experienced communicating with somebody where you're like sharing something and then they come back at you with, rather than really hearing you from your perspective, they're analyzing it. They're saying, yeah, that's right, that's wrong. I agree with that, I don't agree with that. Versus, oh, I hear you, that you're really into that. You see how I'm sort of separating my opinions and analysis and all this like evaluation from what's going on, like from embracing like Like somebody's like, yeah, let me tell you about this badass recipe. It has this and that and all these things. And then you're just like, yeah, I hate tomatoes. Versus, wow, it sounds like you really are excited about this new recipe you made up. And are you, what about it, blah, 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 blah. And just sparks off this curiosity. Da, 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 da. Okay, so increased patience. I won't go into that because it's a little bit amorphous, and actually everything else kind of touches on that a little bit. If you're pausing your emotions in order to get where they're coming from, you're practicing patience. On the road, like I was saying, that's practicing patience. Da, 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 da. Shift into having a more positive outlook. Well, you're learning to give people a benefit of the doubt, for one thing. Whether you want to or not, it's going to happen to you if you practice this. You're eventually going to become much more optimistic about humans because you're practicing seeing the similarities versus the differences. Okay. Okay, I'm done. Except for what you can do right now. I mean, that'll be sort of a resources thing in a way. Q&A. So, again, so you have thoughts on any of that? There's a lot. Yeah.
I mean, what purpose does anger serve, or when should you embrace that?
Anger?
Yeah, because it sounded like that, like when you're talking about cars, it sounded like your objective might have been to prevent yourself from feeling anger in the first place, but I had a different place for that.
Yeah. I think it can serve a purpose at times, sort of like fear does.
So this is all really about connecting with people and identifying their values and finding some value to connect on at the human level. And I hear that there's this concern about going tribalism. But I've read that there's a lot of independent voters out there, and a large segment, 40%, 35%, something like that. I think that's a great space to try and have libertarians connecting with these independent voters and have more conversations. And they should be easier to connect with than either of the other two tribes.
So you want them to be easier to connect with?
I think it's an opportunity, possibly, to
what is
grow
an
our
opportunity?
numbers, to locate these independent voters
Yeah.
and have more conversations with them. And I think practicing these principles are easier with an independent voter than it would be with either of the two.
Oh, sure. They're closer to you in terms of what the strategies they. So I'm separating out strategies from values and needs and feelings. So we have a feeling, or we have a strategy to try to meet a need. And if our need is not getting met, we're pissed off, we have a negative emotion. If our need is getting met, we have a positive emotion. But that's going off on a tangent. Thank you. Anybody else?
Besides the book you mentioned, do you have any other resources that would be good for us to share? Oh, duh, it's right there at the bottom.
They're new.
Yeah.
Thanks to Phil.
I know a lot of people it would help to hear this.
Yay! Good. Yeah. On the ClearSay site, that's a site I made many years ago for voluntarism and nonviolent communication. And when I say voluntarism, again, it's so similar to libertarianism that I think you guys have dated. I've got some old animations I made where Ron Paul is doing stuff and saying things, and yeah, it's all comedy. Every one of them is short. It's made for the low attention span people. The animations I made that are put on there, blah blah, articles and resources, links to resources. Everything I've mentioned here, you can get to, like my free book, you can get to from there. CV Facts is a whole other thing it's a different kind of resource, not what I'm talking about here, but I get many submissions a day now for articles and videos that are counter to the mainstream narrative on COVID. Okay, treatments and what happens to your body and all the different things. So that's something I've dove deeply into. I've actually become quite knowledgeable on biology and stuff because of that, but whatever. So that's a different kind of resource. So yeah, ClearSay is where to go, and I think are there any burning thoughts or questions or desires right now before I sign out, leave? No?
All right, well,
Thank you.
and yeah, let's give a round of applause. Scott. Thank you very much, Scott. So, voluntarists of Boston.
Yeah.
You do a couple of events every month, right?
Yeah.
So
We're doing a monthly barbecue. We've been doing that for a couple of years, a long time.
I found it easily, so on the internet. So if you want to look him up,
That's the meetup group.
it's a meetup
We
group.
have Telegram groups and yeah.
So check out this organization. So I'm going to make a shameless plug. We do outreach booths 3 times a year, right around election time. This stuff is perfect, and we have been. Well, I say we. Folks like Bo and Jace, Amy, and people who've been going and doing these booths, they're a lot better at it than I am. I think I'm getting there. But you definitely, exactly what you're talking about. You're going to come up and your job is to listen, to find out where they're coming from. And a lot of times, like you said, they'll say something and you'll understand what their real need is, what they really want. And that way, then you can kind of segue it into maybe how libertarian might solve that problem for them. Not telling them how what they think is wrong. Right?
Oh,
It's
I
just
share one
find
thing that's super relevant.
Sure.
Like it's the business thing that I really go into. A story, sort of, quick one. So I'm a hired gun in terms of programming. Like people bring me into their companies to write software and do other things. And this one independent banker association, I was working with them. I would sit in on these meetings, and with NBC or Practical EmPath, I would identify and be like, okay, that guy over there, his greatest value right now is power. This other one, his is recognition. That chick over there, hers is security. And I would just identify each person around the table. After, of course, you got to hear them talk a little bit and watch them. And then once you identify what their primary and secondary values are, then it's a hell of a lot easier to address their concerns, to provide or propose a solution that they'll like, to debate with them if you need to, whatever. Okay, so that's the, thank you.